What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, guys, today we are going to get into Carlos Prates and how his run in the UFC with only 4 fights has been nothing short of spectacular, and he looked phenomenal against Neil Magny. We're going to talk about him, some of the call-outs that he made post-fight, and what could be next for this budding contender. We're going to get into some Shavkat, Rakhmonov, Kamaru Usman news, see what may be transpiring there. Is an interim belt going to be on the line? Is the fight going to happen at all? You know, Bilal Muhammad in the mix, he's chiming in as well, so we're going to talk about that. But obviously, we have a huge pay-per-view card coming up this week, and we want to break down what we feel are the most important fights on that card and give predictions. So, Nick, I think we start right at the top of the bill.
Let's get into
Jon
it.
Jones, Stipe Miocic. You know, Stipe Miocic, it's been over 1,200 days since we've seen him last fight in the UFC's octagon. Jon's been out some time, but not quite that long. This fight, really, a lot of people have mixed feelings on it, myself included.
Yeah.
I do feel like Tom Aspinall is the most deserving and probably the best heavyweight on planet Earth right now.
Yeah.
However, you know, we've seen that it's the common theme in this sport with the UFC that if you have a certain status and a certain level of achievement and acumen behind your name, you do get certain favors and certain things. And so
Right.
this fight is kind of that for me. I personally think that Stipe Miocic is the best heavyweight of all time. Now, if you have Fedor as your number one guy,
Yeah.
okay, cool. If you have Cain Velasquez, that's fine with me as well. But for me, it's Stipe. Jon Jones, for me, is also my number one best pound per pound fighter of all time. So you have the GOAT versus the heavyweight GOAT. So you have a very sellable story here. Now, when you look at the X's and O's, I'm not sure they tell that same exciting story. But I
Right.
do feel like this fight could be a little bit closer than a lot of people think that it might be.
Yeah.
You know, Stipe Miocic, yes, he's 43 years old, but he's not Cyril Gane in the sense that he's not really got any wrestling behind him.
Right.
Stipe Miocic is a very good wrestler. Now, he's probably not as good as Jon, but he's able to defend the takedown, I think, better than Cyril Gane was.
For sure.
Jon Jones is good everywhere. He's really good on the feet. He's very, very durable. We've seen as that first fight against Alexander Gustafsson, he showed his heart and his durability. And I expect, you know, now at heavyweight, his durability, if he does get tested, which he didn't in his only heavyweight fight against Gane, but if he happens to get tested against Stipe, who is very good with his boxing, and that's how he tends to get the job done on most occasions, I think Jon's chin can hold up pretty well. I don't see this fight being a quick Jon comes across the cage, throws a few shots, gets the takedown, gets the sub. I think we're going to see a couple of rounds here, which is what I want to see out of Jon at heavyweight. Now, I'm not going to bury the lead and say that I think Stipe Miocic is going to win this fight.
No.
I believe that Jon Jones is going to be victorious, but I kind of want to walk through how the fight's going to go and what method of victory we think that Jon is going to ultimately win with. So give me your initial thoughts on the fight first, and then, you know, your prediction ultimately.
Well, I'm looking forward to this fight, and it almost feels like the closest thing we have to a Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao, right? It's expired.
Right.
It went past its date, and we wish we would have seen it a long time ago, but things happened, and we didn't. So we have to deal with it right now. I still think it's going to be a fun fight. I think anytime they go to Madison Square Garden and Jon Jones is on the card, there's a heavyweight title on the line. These types of things make the UFC and have made the UFC great for many, many years and decades now. Conor McGregor is kind of the guy that changed the sport, where it's not so much about divisions anymore, it's about characters. But everybody knows that the most coveted division in all of combat sports is the heavyweight division. So forget the stars of the sport and everything like that. Forget the GOAT and all that. Just on paper alone, you got the heavyweight champion, the longest sitting champion, versus the guy who's, you know, never actually lost a fight and wants to dare to be great and go up and take the heavyweight belt. So this fight, to me, it has to happen right now. And I understand Tom Aspinall is kind of getting the crap end of the stick, but you just have to deal with that because everybody's window in fighting is so small, and the UFC can only make so many good fights during these guys' careers, and they just have to line up perfectly. I feel like the UFC fans would feel robbed if we didn't see this fight. And in hindsight, of course, we're going to be like, yeah, of course, Aspinall probably should have been in there for this fight. But We got to give a guy like Stipe, a legend, the opportunity. And Jon Jones deserves to have these types of opportunities as well. So I'm all for this fight happening. Now, as for how the fight goes, and the best way to, make your prediction is try to visualize how you see it going. And look, we've got a lot of characters that play fun personalities and roles in this game, and there's a little bit of trolling that goes on in the UFC these days. Jon Jones is no stranger to that. He loves to get in the mix online and jump in and throw some little Easter eggs out there to see if you catch them. He says he's been training a lot with Gable Stevenson and Gordon Ryan this camp, and you can see the footage, and that would lead you to believe that there's going to be a lot of grappling going on. And if that's the case, you have to assume that Jon Jones is going to go across the cage when he feels comfortable striking with Stipe, and he's going to eventually get this fight taken down and utilize some of that grappling that he's been using during the camp. But you also have to look at the other aspect of trolling that he's been doing. The brand new rules just allowed 12-6 elbows and kneeing downed opponents.
Yes.
The rule for a downed opponent has changed. Jon Jones' only loss is to Matt Hamill, and he was beating him so bad, he started 12-6 elbowing him. It was illegal. It's the only loss. Dana White disputes that hardcore, and I think if anybody could get a fight overturned from about a decade ago, it's Dana White, and it would be for Jon Jones. But the best way, if they can't do that, to get redemption on that is Jon Jones to go out there and showcase that new skill, the one he's has perfected for probably a decade by now, the vicious 12-6 elbow, the one that's the most brutal thing, apparently, according to people that know nothing about the sport and karate teachers around the world. It's the most brutal thing. So I believe it's going to be a bold prediction for me, but I got to go bold with this. Jon Jones, first round submission, strikes for a couple minutes with Stipe until he decides to take him down with either a body lock variation, pushes him against the cage and trips him, or he just shoots in with a wrestling takedown, winds up taking the back, maybe trips him from that position, finds his way to mount, and looks for a 12-6 elbow. That's how I'm seeing this fight go, because I think Jon Jones wants to prove a point, and I think he wants to get the win back that he has all these years tried to rewrite or tried to erase from his memory and his record, but I think that's the best way he could do it.
So you said first round submission. Are you thinking he's going to use the 12-6 to get a submission, or do you think he actually could finish the fight with 12-6 elbows?
I was on such a roll that I totally had a brain fart there. I think 12-6 elbows to finish the fight. If he can't finish the fight with the elbows, if they're not shooting through clear enough, I think he could look to strike and then potentially find a submission, but I think he wants to ground and pound Stipe out, and I think he'd really like to do it with 12-6 elbows. Of course, he will take what's available if he can't get that done, but I have a feeling he wants to take this fight to the ground, finish it early, and finish it with 12-6 elbows.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's going to finish it with 12-6, but I do think he's going to throw some.
Yeah.
And I think Jon's a guy who likes to make a statement.
Maybe
right?
even standing.
Yeah, Jon's a guy who, if Dana White's number one as far as disputing that loss, Jon Jones is 1B. You know what I mean? So it's Jon doesn't believe he's ever lost, and in reality, he should have never lost. He should have an O on his record.
Right.
That said, Jon is the type of fighter who really doesn't just want to win fights.
No.
Jon at this point could retire, and about 70% of the MMA community would agree and say that Jon Jones is the best UFC fighter in the history of UFC fighters, in the history of all MMA.
And they'd be right.
And they would probably, they would be right. So Jon, why is he still doing this? He's doing this for, obviously he's getting big paydays. We can just all, understand that and move on from that point. But there's more to it than just that, because Jon's a rich man already.
Right.
Jon is doing this because he wants to leave. He wants that other 30% that have George St. Pierre, Khabib, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, Anderson Silva as their greatest of all time. He wants 100% consensus. I'm the best of all time. And he feels that beating the best of all time, who operated his entire career in a division above him, is what's going to get him there. Yeah. And he's just petty enough to try to finish it with the 12-6, just to show that, hey, if you think that I lost that fight, watch me do that same move against the best heavyweight that there has ever been. And so I could see that. I don't see it being first round finish. No. I see it being a second or third round finish. I think the first round's going to be, kind of feeling out on the feet. I think because Stipe, you got to watch out for Stipe. He put Daniel Cormier on his ass. He put Fabricio Verdum on his ass. Yeah. He's a very good boxer. And Stipe Miocic, at 43 years old, they say the last thing to go is your power.
Right.
He's not going to be as fast as Jon. He's not going to be as explosive or strong as Jon, but he does have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And if you look at Stipe's record and you look at some of the heavyweights that he has a victory by KO or TKO against, he's nobody to get in there and mess around with. Because Stipe Miocic can knock you clean out.
For sure.
And so I think Jon's aware of that, and he doesn't want to get embarrassed at this stage of his career. So I think Jon is going to be a little bit more, not apprehensive, but a little bit more conservative and cautious against Stipe than he was against Ciryl Gane. I think he respects the fighter that Stipe is more than he respected Ciryl Gane, if only for the fact that it's a better matchup on paper.
Yeah.
You know, the wrestling and all that. Ciryl Gane, he bounces around a lot. He's right for the takedown. Here's the question I have for you. So I'll give you my final prediction, and then I'll pose a question to you. My final prediction: Jon Jones, third round, ground and pound TKO.
Okay.
He's gonna knock Stipe down or take him down. I like the body lock that you said. I think he's gonna be working those insides, a lot of clinch work, looking to pummel inside, get that body lock, get Stipe down, and try to get the job done on the ground. I think it's gonna be strikes in the third round. But here's the question, because I just named 5 people for you that people argue are the best of all time: Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, Khabib, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, George St. Pierre. Some people throw Fedor in there. But if you made a top 10 list, not many people would have Stipe on your top 10 list.
Right.
Let's just play devil's advocate for a minute. What if we're all wrong? What if we all got this thing wrong? Mm-hmm. What if Stipe Miocic comes out there and flatlines Jon Jones?
Yeah.
Where does that put Stipe on the greatest of all time list? Because nobody mentions his name when it comes to that. And I think Stipe's got a unique opportunity here to put himself in the running for, you're already in the heaviest, baddest division of all time.
Right.
You're the best in that division.
Right.
The only thing you haven't done, I mean, you look at the litany of former champions that he's knocked out and defeated. The only thing you haven't done is beaten the absolute best of all time, which you're going to be locked in a cage with on Saturday.
Right.
Where do you put Stipe in the greatest of all time list if he does defeat Jon Jones?
Well, you got to put him right there where Jones would be put, because you look at Jones's body work, it's nothing short of spectacular. It's flawless, but it wasn't at heavyweight. It was at light heavyweight. And when you have a guy like Stipe who ran the heavyweight division, it's not like he was ducking anybody lighter than him. He simply couldn't make any weight class lighter than heavyweight. That means he would beat everybody under him. The only division that could give any sort of conversation to that is the light heavyweights, because they're the closest in size, but we never really saw the champions moving up until now. So I feel like if Stipe Miocic goes out there and shocks the world as a big underdog after 1,200 something days off of fighting, if he goes out there and wins, we got to give him the same credit. But I also don't think we should expect more out of Stipe if he wins. I think he should retire whether he wins or loses.
Yeah.
And he should go down as the GOAT. But if he goes down as the GOAT, it should be for now. It will not settle the conversation.
Right.
The conversation gets settled when Jon Jones beats Stipe Miocic, beats Tom Aspinall, and beats Alex Pereira. If he beats those 3 guys in his next 3 fights, he's the GOAT. There's no way anybody can catch him unless they have the body of work start to finish in their UFC career like he does. And I don't see that happening with the way the sport's evolved. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think Stipe has a chance. It's the heavyweight division. One shot can change anything. And most people have less power moving backwards, and that's where Jon likes to take his fighters, is to pressure them moving backwards. Stipe Miocic can still knock you out moving backwards. Go to the Fabrizio Verdum knockout. It was beautiful. So Stipe's heavy-handed. Jon has to be cautious. He has to be careful and calculated, but he knows how to enter in. He knows how to mix it up with the striking and the wrestling and the pressure and the angles. He'll do everything he needs to do to find his way inside, and whether he wants to strike with Stipe, he'll get the better of those exchanges. And if he doesn't like what he's seeing out of the Stipe striking, if he thinks it's too risky, he will flip the script and take the fight to the ground. That's my opinion. I think he's just going to start doing it earlier than later, because my one question about Jon Jones, I believe, is the same question about Jon Jones that Jon Jones would ask about himself at heavyweight. Can I go 5 rounds carrying all this extra weight?
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't know. I don't think he really wants to find out. I think he'd rather go out there and beat these guys early, get it done quick, and leave that to his imagination. Because who knows? He might not have the gas that he had back at 205. When you're carrying 30, 40 extra pounds, you tend to be slower. You tend to gas out a little bit faster. More muscle means more lactic acid, more buildup, and you simply take longer to recover. So I think Jon Jones is going to have a sense of urgency behind him. Stipe needs to come out and get that ring rust off him very quickly. If he does, he could shock the world, but I'm one of those guys that's sitting with the odds makers. I think they have it right. Maybe a little lopsided for Jones because it's heavyweight and anything can happen, but I'm going Jones.
Cool. Let's move on to the co-main.
Oh, great fight.
A rematch. My short list for fight of the night.
Oh,
the
yeah.
First time it happened here in Houston, I was actually in the stadium for that fight, and it was electric. Both guys got a massive pop when they walked out. This fight, to me, could really go either way. Charles is a favorite, minus 260 to plus 210, I believe it is, for Michael Chandler. Now, what's the reason for that? Charles being a 2.5 to 1 favorite. I think it's the fact that Charles has looked really good, in the recent years since Michael Chandler has been out. Obviously, they're factoring in that first fight. Charles got the finish, but a lot of people forget that Charles also got sat down in that first fight.
Right.
And, that fight was back and forth to the highest degree until it ended.
Right.
So Michael Chandler, to me, the X factor is, pushing 40 years old now. I think he's 37 or 38.
Yeah.
I want to say 38. How is he going to look after over 2 years out of the cage and pushing 40? Right. Now, if we're looking at pictures and photographs on social media, any 38-year-old would love to look like, any 28-year-old would love to look like Iron Mike Chandler. He's built like an absolute wrecking ball.
Yeah.
And he's got a hell of a lot of power.
Yeah.
Charles Oliveira's got a hell of a lot of power too, but Charles does get hit and he does get sat down. Now, to me, if Michael's going to win this fight, he needs to do it on the feet.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to go to the ground with Charles because, as he saw in the first fight, even when he knocked Charles down and he followed him to the ground, he almost got submitted.
Right.
So Charles is really freaking sneaky from his back. Yeah. I think Charles is the biggest threat, from the back, from the bottom position on the ground, of any fighter on the UFC's roster.
Definitely today.
Definitely today. Yeah. He's got great triangles, great arm bars. He slips under and takes your back from the guard position. I mean, he's really crafty.
Yeah.
Most submissions of anybody in UFC history.
Yep.
So I think that Michael Chandler needs to try to win this fight by knockout.
Yeah.
And I think Charles can win this fight on the feet and he can win it by submission.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm going to pick Charles, because I think that, when you look at everything, it's a coin flip, because both of these guys hit like freight trains. Neither one of these guys shies away from engaging. So, it could be a rock'em sock'em robot. Whoever's head pops up first is the loser. But I think Charles has got more paths to victory and he's a little bit fresher. And for that reason, I'm taking Charles Oliveira. I think he gets it done by submission, but the submission comes after a knockdown. I think he knocks Chandler down in the second round. He follows him to the back, and he lands a rear naked choke.
Okay, so something similar to the first fight, but instead of a TKO, it's submission.
Submission, yep.
Yeah. And look, if you go back and watch that first round of that fight, it was highly competitive. Both men had great moments. Chandler had a knockdown. I think Oliveira also had a knockdown and some great grappling moments. You could tell when the fight went to the ground that Oliveira had the advantage. And what we've seen in Michael Chandler's UFC career is, yes, he's got crazy power in his hands. He's able to find his targets, even if it's a taller opponent. Just like Charles Oliveira, he found the target. He's able to put him down, but he gets very tenacious when he does hurt somebody. If I were in his corner after that first time he dropped Charles Oliveira and stayed in there and tried to go in and almost got submitted, then got up, but then didn't leave, and I think that's too risky. I think the way Michael Chandler wins is exactly what you said. He's got to keep it on the feet, but you can't just keep it on the feet with Oliveira. You have to really mix it up with your angles, with your level changing, with your feints, because Michael Chandler is usually a shorter opponent. When you're fighting Charles Oliveira and you've got the stature and the build of Michael Chandler, you've got to find ways to get inside, because not only is he longer, but he actually knows how to use his range. That's exactly what led to him finishing Chandler in the first fight. The long 1-2, I think it was a 3, a long hook at the end of it. Really beautiful combination, stayed tight throughout, used his feet to come in and his feet to go out. It was really, really well timed. And the reason it happened is because Michael Chandler was standing straight in front of him. Michael Chandler is an explosive guy. He's really good at stuff like switch step overhands and chaining overhands into wrestling. That's what he's got to do. He's got to find angles, move laterally a whole lot, If he doesn't do that, his chances on the feet go down even more. And I think if he goes to the ground, again, he's going to find himself in a lot of trouble, because when he goes to the ground, he's so gung-ho about either landing serious power punches to end the fight or find a submission. And he usually hunts for that submission so ferociously that he loses his position. And these guys like Charles Oliveira, you're not going to just find a submission on them. You really got to beat them up, batter them, and then slide one in on them. Very sneaky. It's almost impossible to get a guy like that choked out in the UFC.
Unless you're Islam Makhachev.
Right, exactly. You got to be a different level. And Michael Chandler is as complete a martial artist as you can find, but his jiu-jitsu isn't where his striking is. It isn't where his wrestling is. And so when you have a different mindset growing up and you've been wrestling your whole life, sometimes you do think more pressure, more just top position, and you forget about some of the other things. And that's where these good jiu-jitsu guys find their little escapes. But all in all, this fight is just as close and just as competitive as the first one. It's a toss-up. This one will probably be fight of the night because these guys do nothing but put on exciting fights. You can make a case for Chandler. I tried my hardest to make a case for Chandler because I want to see good things happen for Chandler. Oliveira has been the champ before. Chandler took 2 years off, and I think ring rust is a real thing, but also he's in wars all the time. So those 2 years might have actually benefited him.
That's a good point.
It's not to the point where he's been competing his whole life. I think he understands how to get back in the game. But after taking 2 years to let your body fully recover and prep for fights, and then take out a little bit of time in between camps, even though he wasn't fighting, I think he was doing the right thing. So we're going to get a healthy version. I think we see the best Michael Chandler we've seen yet. But I still think Charles Oliveira gets it done. I think he actually submits him, like you said. Does some good striking. I think it's still going to be fight of the night, but I think we're going to see a finish in it. But I don't know if Charles Oliveira is going to knock him out this time. I think he is going to go for submission. I'm going to say late, though. I'm going to be a little bit selfish. I want to see this fight go at least 3 rounds. So I'm going to go 3 rounds. I'll go early 3rd round finish, submission for Charles Oliveira.
Nice. Now let's move on to the feature bout.
Oh, yeah.
Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig. And this fight, this is the biggest odds disparity on the main card.
When Bo's on the fight, it usually is.
Yeah, and he's a minus. And it's usually because the opponents are lesser opponents. I mean, if we're just calling a spade.
Right.
But Paul Craig's a real good fighter. I mean, Paul's a top 10 guy for a long time. He's got great submissions. He's durable. So I think it's a lot closer than the odds makers have it.
Yeah.
I think Bo Nickal needs to be careful in this fight because Paul Craig's got phenomenal, jiu-jitsu from bottom position. He's got really good arm bars from bottom position. Just ask, Jamal Hill.
Yeah.
He's got really, really slick heel hooks.
Yeah.
And that's something, if we're going way back before Bo even fought in MMA for the first time, he grappled against Gordon Ryan here in Houston. And obviously, it's hard to put a jiu-jitsu guy versus a wrestler in a rule set that makes it fair for either guy.
Right.
But as soon as that fight hit the ground, Bo got heel hooked.
Right.
I mean, instantaneously. It was like 3 seconds.
Right.
And Gordon had it. Now Bo's obviously a better jiu-jitsu player now than he was, I think it was 5-6 years ago.
And Paul Craig isn't Gordon, but he's still a very good heel.
But he's still a very good heel. And he's got more experience in MMA jiu-jitsu than Gordon Ryan does. Because Gordon Ryan's never... had to try to submit somebody while they're also trying to put his lights out with strikes.
Right.
So it is a different thing.
Right.
I'm still going to take Bo to win this fight.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to be one of those ones where he needs to get it done with his hands.
Yeah.
Paul's slick and he's crafty and he's a veteran.
Yeah.
So getting on the ground with Paul Craig when you're a guy who's not got the same submission acumen that Paul has is a risky proposition. There's been really good grapplers that ended up on the ground with Paul Craig that got submitted.
Right.
So I think that Bo Nickal does have something that a lot of wrestlers don't have, which is, yes, I know his striking doesn't look like Alex Pereira's, and it never will.
Right.
But he does get the job done with his strikes. He is effective with his strikes, and he just got some power. And Paul Craig is susceptible a little bit to the power. And so I think that Bo Nickal's going to be able to control where the fight takes place because of the wrestling. And I think he's going to use a few takedowns to try to exhaust Paul. I don't think he's going to really want to engage in trying to advance position grappling because you never know what Paul Craig's going to do. But I think he's going to be able to wear him down with the wrestling. He's going to be able to dictate where the fight takes place and ultimately get the job done with his hands. But it's not because he's a great striker. It's because of the threat of the takedown, the threat of the takedown continuously that leads to the shots being open.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, Bo Nickal is the favorite for good reason. I think he's got more ways to win than Paul Craig. Paul Craig is a phenomenal jiu-jitsu player. And he's also a durable fighter. When it comes to striking, he can take some shots. And we've seen him take brutal shots while he's going for heel hooks and stuff. And you're like, dude, let go of that. But then somehow he'll wind up getting the leg, and it's deep enough, and he can get a finish. And Paul Craig is definitely nobody's just like a stepping stone. He's going to give Bo Nickal everything he's got. I think it's the right jump in competition. Bo's been fighting some younger guys that maybe don't have the same amount of experience as him in the UFC, but similar experience. Paul Craig, though, he's been in the game for quite a while now, and he's fought some big guys, submitted Ankalaev. That's no small feat. So
yeah, I mean, that's not something to just brush over.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and I did just brush over it. But no, Ankalaev is literally the guy that a lot of people think will give Alex Pereira a difficult time defending his belt. So we're talking about a legit guy. Paul Craig can win this fight for sure. But I'm 100% with you on the fact that Bo Nickal wins this fight on his feet. Yes, I agree with you that a wrestler can take the fight and dictate where it takes place because of the takedown. But when you've got a guy like Paul Craig who loves to find sneaky submissions, and he's really good at finding them while his opponent takes him down, because in almost all Paul Craig fights, we see him fighting on the ground. Now, occasionally we'll see him pull guard, which is almost unheard of in MMA, but you rarely see that. Most of the fights, though, that he's in, he's not pulling guard, but he is winding up on the ground. So it's usually wrestlers that take him down, and he's able to still find offense even from the bottom. And sometimes he's able to reverse. Now, Bo Nickal's pressure and top game and his jiu-jitsu is evolving a lot. So I don't think it'll be so easy if Paul Craig does get put on the ground for him to either get back up or find a submission. And that's where his difficulty is going to lie, because I don't see him having the power to knock Bo Nickal out. And I think Bo Nickal will take the fight to the ground, maybe not love what he's feeling down there from Paul Craig, get the fight back up to his feet, whether it's from standing up or the first round ending. And then I think he gets it done with his striking. His hands are heavy. He knows how to throw his punches, and the fact that he's not afraid to get taken down lets him really sit down on his shots once he enters into boxing range. And when you've got a guy who can literally throw an overhand and then in 1 second have you on your back on the ground because of the way he steps with the overhand and his pressure and his ability to chain the wrestling in through the striking, when you've got a guy that can do that so well, you've got to be on your P's and Q's. You've got to be really long, really good at fighting on the outside, and Paul Craig just doesn't have that. So I think Bo Nickal is going to be able to, I think he's going to take the fight to the ground. I don't think he's going to find a submission. So I think the best way for Bo Nickal to win this fight is to knock Paul Craig out and to do that on the feet. Avoid any sort of leg entanglements or issues on the ground that Paul Craig might pose. Get out of that. Take him where you think you have an advantage. You definitely have a power advantage in the striking. I think he gets it done. I'm going to go... I think we see a full round. I'm going to go second round TKO finish with strikes for Bo Nickal.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I think probably... Man, and it's so funny because we normally split on some of these picks. And I think it's worth noting because I'm going to pick second round TKO for Bo Nickal as well. But I think it's worth noting that UFC 309 is a good pay-per-view. Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of big implications that are happening at the top of the bill. Yeah. And there's certainly, some serious implications that are happening at 155 in the co-main event. But it's not the most competitive of cards that we've seen recently on paper. So, we try to call it how we see it, and we try to be truthful. And I think that, most of the people watching this will also agree that the three people that we picked are the likely three winners.
Major favorites.
The co-main being the one that's the toss-up. But it's, I'm still excited for 309.
Me too.
It's something to me that it has big fight feel, even though there's a lot of lopsided, fights on the card if you just look at it from an odds perspective. But it's going to be great. Yeah. And now I kind of want to move on to the final pay-per-view of the year and what's going on there.
Yeah, 310?
310. So Shavkat, Rakhmonov, still open for a fight. even though Bilal Muhammad is dealing with a toe injury and he's out, he can't even train again for a month and a half.
Right.
So, and we know that he won't fight during Ramadan. So it's going to be interesting to see where his recovery lies when he gets back into training camp and how that lines up with the UFC schedule.
Right.
To see if he fights in Q1 of 2024 or if it's going to be after Ramadan in the spring or early summer.
Right.
Now, I'm not one to just call for interim belts right out of the gate, especially when somebody only became the champion a few months ago. And I don't know that I'm really necessarily doing that here, but I do want to see, and Kamaru Usman has inserted his name into the conversation, and he told Henry Cejudo on their podcast, like, look, I'm not shying down from anybody. If you've learned anything from me, it's that I'm game. I'll fight anybody.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about this all the time on this podcast, and that is, if you get locked in the cage with a former champion, that's like having potential gold in your hands.
Yeah.
Because they're so few and far between. And champions, once they lose their belt and they start to decline, they don't stick around long.
Right.
The BJ Penn story is not one that you're seeing in today's mixed martial arts world.
With the exception of Tony Ferguson.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was literally about to say with the exception of Tony, but so if they start to decline, they start to lose, they call it a day.
Right.
And so if you get a chance to fight one of them, it's a really rare opportunity. And I think it's really rare for a couple of reasons. Whether there's an interim belt on the line or not doesn't matter to me. I still kind of want to see this fight. And if I'm Shavkat, I take the fight because I think it's a very winnable fight for Shavkat. I don't think it causes him to lose any traction with the Bilal fight, unless he were to get upset. But quite the opposite. If, you put a former champ on your resume and then, everybody has to take you even more seriously than they already do, which most people take Shavkat pretty damn seriously with a perfect record and 100% finish rate. But this is why, to me, it's really intriguing because a lot of conversation since Shavkat came out and since Khamzat came out is who would win in a fight.
Yeah.
Shavkat Rakhmonov, Khamzat Chimaev. Now, they're in two different weight classes now. Khamzat has gravitated up. But Shavkat's an enormous welterweight fighter.
Huge.
You've seen him in person. You can attest to how big he actually is. I've never seen him in person, but I can only imagine from what you've told me, he's just as big as he looks on the TV.
Every bit of 200 plus pounds before fight camp.
Yeah, so huge. And so, what's the one thing that the two of them are missing? A common opponent who's a really top-level opponent.
Right.
We saw Khamzat have a little bit of issue with Kamaru Usman.
Yeah.
He won the fight, and I think it was the right decision. Had that fight gone 5 rounds, it could have been a whole different story.
Yeah, agreed.
And so how does Shavkat look against a common opponent to Khamzat Chimaev? Yeah. Because presumably one day he's going to find himself at 85.
Right.
And Khamzat right now is looking like he's the next in line for a title shot. The general consensus is Sean Strickland's getting screwed here.
Yeah.
And, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think Sean probably deserves a rematch, but just from an excitement perspective, I think Khamzat versus DDP is the next fight up.
For sure.
So if Shavkat finds himself in a year or 18 months in the 185 division and Khamzat happens to be at the top or is the champion or whatever, they're going to look to this particular fight if it materializes. Khamzat Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kamaru Usman.
Right. Do the MMA math. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and we know math doesn't work, and that doesn't stop us from doing it because we love to speculate in this sport. All of us do. So, to me, I think they should make this fight. I'm indifferent on the interim belt. If they want to put one up, fine. If they don't, fine. But I think they still should make the fight because you can't really have Pantoja at the top of the bill. No disrespect to him.
Yeah.
But he's fighting a newcomer to the UFC. And
right.
You need something in that final pay-per-view of the year that really gets us out of our seats saying, man, I got to see this. And Khamzat Chimaev, or I keep saying Khamzat.
Yeah.
Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kamaru Usman. That fight does it for me.
100%. And I'm the opposite of you. I'm not indifferent. I think there should be an interim title on the line because we don't know when Bilal's going to come back. We've got a bunch of really good prospects waiting patiently at the top of the division. They're all healthy. They're all ready to go. Usman did a lot of great things as the champion. He deserves to have a little bit of love thrown his way. If there's an interim title on the line, I think he deserves it. Shavkat Rakhmonov was scheduled to be in a title fight, so he deserves to be in a 5-round title fight. And the thing about the interim belt, and I don't think Bilal should push back on that at all either, it does nothing. It doesn't change his belt at all. It doesn't change the pay-per-view model that he's going to get paid for his next title fight. Nothing changes. All it does is it heightens the excitement for the next fight, because to the masses, when they see 2 belts are on the line, they don't really know the difference between the interim and not. Like, there's 2 belts and somebody's going to get the 1 belt, right? Or, they understand.
Somebody's going home with both of them.
Right. Both belts, or, one of them has to leave their belt. And I think that's the way they should go about this. Shavkat he's got star and champion written all over him. I really do think that when he fights Bilal, it's going to be a very big eye-opener to see just how good this guy is, because Bilal is fantastic. He's very good everywhere. But Shavkat, to me, feels like the next level guy. I can't wait for the day that we get to break down a Khamzat versus Shavkat fight, but obviously, they're in different divisions right now, and they both are literally 1 fight away from a title shot. So let's let them settle that, do a couple of fights in their respective divisions, and then maybe 2027 we'll visit that fight, and I can't wait for that. But yeah, I think Shavkat has more ways to win the fight against Usman. Obviously, Usman has fallen on tough times lately, but he's still done so much for the division that you might as well do it. And look, if he loses, then you've built another great prospect, a future champion, a star, off of a world-class former champion like Usman. And that's the way this sport goes. I don't think Usman wants any special treatment. I don't think he wants to have easy fights. I think he does want to fight with the best in the world, prove to himself that he can still hang. And if he can't, then he understands where his place is in the sport. But I don't think we've seen enough out of Usman to just put him in that retirement division. I think we need to let Usman prove to us that maybe he's past his prime and beyond his best days. But Shavkat Rakhmonov is not an easy fight. If he's willing to take it, there should be a belt on the line. And same thing goes for Shavkat. Usman is a very tough fight. We just saw him take Kamaru Usman or Khamzat Chimaev on a few days' notice, went the distance. Like you said, if it was 5 rounds, which this fight will be, the tides were changing and it could have been a different outcome. Shavkat doesn't look like he weathers at all late in the fight. I think he's going to be fun to watch in 5 rounds. I hope there's a belt on the line. And look, 310 really needs it, because like you said, Pantoja versus a guy who's making his UFC debut is a hard sell. And putting anything that's not a title fight over a title fight is something that UFC doesn't do. I don't think the UFC would be afraid to put an interim title over a flyweight title.
So you think they'd make it the main event?
So I think they should, and they would make Shavkat versus Usman, a former champion and a hot star in one of the best divisions, the main event over the flyweights, they've got a guy making his debut versus a guy that people like, but he's not a major star right now.
Yeah, and I want to end on this one.
170?
We're staying right in the welterweight division.
Let's do it.
Carlos Prates.
Woo!
Guy is exciting,
monster.
Man. 4-0 in the UFC, 4 knockouts, main event already to his name.
Killer.
This guy's fun.
Yeah,
I am a fan of everything Carlos
the
Prates
fight nerds
is doing. Yeah, the fighting nerds. Those guys are really coming on strong right now. Caio Borralho, I've seen some talk that he is looking to potentially fight Israel Adesanya. I've also seen a couple of different fighting options for Adesanya, so I'm not really sure where that's all going to shake out. But today we're talking about Prates.
Yeah.
So what do we take away? Neil Magny is a really good. I'm mixing everybody's names up today. Yeah,
you're like me.
Yeah, I almost said Jeff Neal because that's who he called out.
Yeah,
but Neil Magny, veteran of the game, a little bit long in the tooth right now, but not an easy guy to beat. Yeah. Very crafty and knows how to finish people and is very slick even when he's losing fights. Carlos Prates dominated him. Carlos Prates' striking is really something to be feared in the 170 division. Now, I love when a fighter tries to take control of their own career and destiny.
Yeah.
And when you get in the octagon and you put on a performance like that and you get a microphone stuck in your face, say something meaningful.
Yeah.
And he called out Jack Della Maddalena.
Love it.
And Jeff Neal. Yep. And he caveated that by saying, JDM is a little bit ahead of me in the rankings, so I might not be deserving of that yet, as now I'm just now breaking into the top 15. So if I can't get that, I want Jeff Neal. Both of those are striking, dream fights.
Yeah.
I would love to see either one of those fights. Jeff Neal probably makes the most sense for the next fight, given the rankings. What were your thoughts on Prates' performance, and how did you like the call-outs?
I loved it. I first of all, you got to give anybody who's willing to make a call-out some credit. So, yes, I love that. And he did it twice. Look, Jack Della Maddalena, that's a lofty shot, but he took the shot, and the fans would love to see that fight. It's not going to happen next. But Jeff Neal is a perfect matchup. And stylistically, that is a great fight for him. Now, Jeff is tough. He's tougher and more difficult to get out of there than Neil Magny at this stage of their careers. But he's there to be hit, and Prates hits hard, and he hits you a lot. Jeff Neal also, he's not really one that's going to look to take you down a whole bunch. He wants to strike with you and put his power against your power, and a lot of times he winds up standing and his opponent's falling. But yeah, I think Prates versus Jeff Neal is probably the best way they can take his career moving forward. He's now already going to be in the rankings, right? Neil Magny was 15, so he should take that 15. And I think Jeff Neal is somewhere in 11 or 12. So it's a perfect step up in competition for him. If you want to talk about the X's and O's, Neil Magny looked like he came in prepared, ready to fight. He looked fine in there, but Prates, the power that he showed very early on made Neil Magny timid to want to engage with him. And the pressure that Prates brings is serious. And he's like a Lomachenko, where he's in your face the whole time. And even if he's not throwing, that pressure is being felt by you, and you're having to move around and adjust and second guess your attack options. So I think what he was doing mentally and pressure-wise was really good against Neil Magny. And then that, of course, forced Neil Magny to look for the takedowns. It forced him to look for some cage work to try to get the fight to the ground. And we found a lot of really, really successful, good-looking takedown defense out of Prates. I mean, a couple of times he shucked him off and was able to find some shots. So when Neil Magny would shoot in and they'd tie up and it'd be like an over-under situation and they'd be moving towards the cage or something, when Prates would find the moment to break free, he would score 1 or 2 shots on the break and then get back to his striking range. And those types of shots were the difference makers to continue to take the confidence away from Neil Magny. I thought that was brilliant. I thought the finishing sequence was really nice. That final shot that put Neil Magny out cold, it didn't even look like it hit him, but he was hitting so hard that once you finally see the punch, it grazed the top of Neil Magny's head, just kind of slid right off of it, but he was throwing with such power that it knocked him out cold before he even hit the ground. So yeah, Prates is a real problem. I can't wait to see what he does. And man, every time 170 feels like we finally got our new coat of paint in, there's a bunch of really good guys that are going to take care of the future of the division, another one pops up. And then like a Hamzat moves out of the division, so they kind of make room for each other. But we've got a logjam. We got Ian Gary, Jack Della Maddalena, Carlos Prates, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Sean Brady's still very much in the mix. Bilal Muhammad. 170 is firing on all cylinders right now, and these are some of the highest level strikers and MMA fighters we have on the entire roster. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, the takedown defense for me was something that was really positive taking away from this.
Beautiful.
Now, obviously, Neil Magny's a good grappler.
Yeah.
He's not Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's not some of these top guys at 170 as far as grappling is concerned.
Less wrestling, more jiu-jitsu.
Exactly. But the fact that Prates did show some solid takedown defense shows me some promise and some development in his game.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see what he does next. Book the Jeff Neal fight ASAP. That's the fight to make. JDM, he deserves a bigger fight than somebody just entering the top 15. But man, give him Jeff Neal and let those guys bang.
Yeah, and I think maybe a feature bout on a pay-per-view card is another thing. Look, he proved to us he can go 5 rounds if he needs to. He didn't bat an eye when they gave him the 5-round opportunity. But let's get it Prates in front of some more eyes. Let's put him on a pay-per-view event. I think if he's a feature bout at 170, there's some fun matchups for him. Jeff Neal is a great matchup, and people know Jeff Neal. They love Jeff Neal. They've seen him fight Shavkat, and they both left with some bonus money. He even made bonus money even though he missed weight by a bunch. That shows you how fun of a fight it was. So I think there's a lot there. Carlos Prates, as long as he keeps calling his shots, avoids the heavy wrestlers in the division, and finds these really good strikers that he can match up well against, I think the sky and the future is very bright for him.
Well said. Well, guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. We want to hear from you. Who are you taking in UFC 309? And especially if you're picking Stipe Miocic, Paul Craig, we want you to drop a comment and let us know why. We love to engage with y'all in the comments. That's one of our favorite things to do.
Absolutely.
If you have not already, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe on the channel. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy the fights, and we'll see you next time.
One last thing, join the Discord. We'll see you over there. It's a lot of fun. We've got a bunch of extra stuff coming out over there, so definitely come check it out. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Yes.